Geopolitical George here. Got it right the first time. Okay, I'm multitasking. We're going to have a quick little lesson on it here. While I'm cooking eggs, I'm boiling eggs. Didn't know I could cook, did you? I got to cook a lot. But anyway. If you're my age, which most of you probably aren't, all this weirdness began in the 70s. I remember I wasn't very old. I was an adolescent kid, but start seeing stuff, the generation gap, and the war between the sexes, and women's rights, and ERA, and then by the late 70s they were doing gay rights and doing, oh man, they were starting to have, the Queer Nation was having love-ins in front of schools. So, two dudes make it out in front of school children. It's cultural terrorism. It's the avant-garde, the big wedge to drive in there. And that's when it started, really. I mean, in earnest. And they really made, there's this focused effort by certain powers that be that were trying to change the ideology of the country. They were trying to get it away from liberalism, classical Jeffersonian liberalism, and try to go to more towards a socialist model where you got more control over people. It's a lot of people that wanted to do that. And ironically, the big multinational corporations and any really big corporations and big businesses, they are all for it because they profit off of it more. How do you profit under socialism? Well, they get to dictate the quality and the quantity of what you have and what you pay for it. You socialize the money and then they draw out of a pool and then they give you what they want. It cuts the market out. There's no competition. There's no, making a better mousetrap or anything like that. They got a lock on everything. It's all monopolies. Big businesses are all about socialism, and financial institutions are really all about it. As I've said before many times, Leon Trotsky got his money for the Bolshevik Revolution from Western financiers, big banks, all run by Rothschild. The plutocrats, the shifts, they gave him the money to start this ball rolling. Why would they do that? But anyway, we're going to talk about ideology. It's all about ideology. It seems like you're in crazy land. All this stuff that's happening, it seems disconnected and discombobulated and self-contradictory, but it's not self-contradictory. They're pulling a big ratchet against you. They're tying you down. It only goes one way. Click, 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 click. All these splinter groups, all these special interests, all these pressure groups, they're all pulling the same way. And then you do have some opposition. There are traditionalists, paleoconservatives, for instance, and your Nixon's moral majority and people like that. Well, those can be hijacked. And you can create fake groups that look like them, that are shiny and have lots of money and pull all the attention away from the real ones. They've done that again and again. The anti-war movement is a good example in the 60s. In the mid-60s, there was a very powerful anti-war movement in America. It was nice, clean-cut college kids that were articulate, and they had a very good case. What the hell was that in Korea? What did that accomplish? What are we doing? And now they want to go in Vietnam? Are you freaking nuts? And they had a real good, clear platform, and they took action. They were articulate. They were getting into Congress and talking to people. Well, that had to be stopped, didn't it? FBI had a counter-intel pro as a program. Had to discredit them. Had to get rid of them. And the CIA, all those intelligence groups, they have their people in the media. They have their editors, the owners of the system. Suddenly, you didn't see those people anymore. all of a sudden the anti-war movement was represented by hippies, Abby Hoffman, Wavy Gravy, Ed Sanders, real radical dirtbag idiots. That's the anti-war movement now. Open communists that want to destroy everything. They want to destroy the family. Well, they're the people against the war in Vietnam. And a whole culture was built to go with it. The music, everything. It was all promoted. I've addressed this before. Your mamas and the papas. Who is that? John Phillips. His dad was military intelligence. Jim Morrison's dad was naval intelligence, and he was deeply involved in getting us in Vietnam. If there's one person that could be solely responsible for it, it was Admiral Morrison. They made him an admiral after he did his thing in the Gulf of Tonkin. Yeah, you can look all that stuff up. They were all made. You didn't see them going around hitting small clubs and trying to get discovered and knocking on doors and handing out quarter track tapes. That didn't happen. First anybody heard any of them, the radio's talking about them. This is a new sensation. This is sweeping the nation. All these kids are so talented. You gotta listen to it. Yeah, all at once. They already had $1 million recording contracts before they ever started. That was all set up. That was to fool you. And the whole thing worked. And I think the guys that did it were so pleased because I think it probably surprised them because it grew legs. They had these dirty, filthy hippies and this weird subculture just to discredit the anti-war movement. But people liked it. It grew legs. It made tons of money. I did that little routine before. I'll do it again. It's a conversation at the Morrison house. Jimmy, get down here. I got something for you. Yes, Father. How do you like to be a rock and roll star, boy? Okay, Dad. That happened. I'm speculating, but it's pretty educated speculation. There's been books written about it. But it's an ideology that they're pushing, not just, well, that's part of it, the corruption, the warmongering, the big money for the military-industrial complex. Got to get rid of all that World War II ordinance and make more and make a lot of profit doing it. And just dump the ball on Cambodia or something. That'll work. Jimi Hendrix is in Cambodia as a private. That smells like spook, big time. Oh, when I say spook, I'm talking about, intelligence agents, not a racial slur. Okay, let's just get that clear, because some words have double meanings. Anyway, you need a clear-cut ideology of what you believe so that you can reject things that are trying to fool you. The whole Nixon's moral majority people, just the average ordinary Americans, it was like this is like a 70s version of the Tea Party. It's probably the same people in the Tea Party. It could get hijacked. Irving Kristol wrote a book called Neoconservatism. He coined the term, supposedly. I guess he probably did. I read it when I was when it came out. I was like 17 or 18 years old and I read his book. And he's a Trotskyist. He was a member of the Trotsky Club at New York University back in the 30s. He hadn't changed. It's still Trotskyism. Neocons are Trotskyites. But the average American fugly from suburbia that gets involved in this stuff and just kind of dabbles in it and doesn't have an ideological center, doesn't understand ideological terminology, doesn't understand political philosophy and doesn't want to, they suck right into it. You got a lot of neocons. A lot of them, and they get diverted into, I support big business because corporations are what made America great. And I support Israel forever. They don't have any idea what they're freaking talking about. They're just blabbing stuff that they see their leaders doing. Anyway. Ideology. What are you going to be, a Jeffersonian liberal? That's over. That was designed, that was constructed, and that evolved for 18th century English yeoman farmers in a Christian society. You're going to have to modify it to make it work now. You got different conditions, right? You don't want to be socialist. Nah. Communist, forget about it. It's over. It was a trick anyway. It always was a trick. The modified socialism, fascism, that's what you're in, basically. The cooperation between government The partnership. It's a partnership between government and big business. Which one's got a hold of the steering wheel? Do you know? I'm pretty sure government had a hold of it in Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. But now, in our version of it, and it's been promoted. I mean, Japan's economy was built as a fascist economy by the U.S. They designed it. And all those Ukrainian and Lithuanian and Latvian Nazis went on the payroll in high-ranking positions and came to the U.S. and Canada, got put in universities, and they've woven through civil society, and they've been making money to support the Ukrainian Nazis, and now things are manifesting. It got to be big, a big freaking moneymaker with an ideology to support it. You have to have an ideology to support it, and their ideology is neo-Nazism. And you're seeing it go off right now. And there's so many fuglies in flyover country that, there are no Nazis in Ukraine, that's just Russian propaganda. I saw it on CNN the other day. Anderson Cooper told me. There's a PR campaign. They're spending billions on them. Very sharp. Very good at what they do. Private PR companies. Excuse me. To sway people's opinion. That's why you see the blue and yellow flags everywhere. Because there's a lot of interests that are pulling all kinds of money out of Ukraine and doing what they want, doing things you can't do anywhere else. The biolabs with specific flu-like spreading diseases that'll run through the populations that are specifically tuned to Russian or Slavs. Okay, Ukrainians too. They're almost, no, there's not much difference between a Ukrainian and a Russian. Not much at all. Some Ukrainians have a little Polish and a little German and a little Hungarian mix, but there's not any difference. It's crazy. They don't care. They're doing all these projects there. People, real smart, this is a meritocracy, You're real smart people that are, worth everything that they get, like Hunter Biden. I'm making millions of dollars over there. Yeah. So they want to protect that. They want to protect the Nazi ideology as the prevailing ideology over the whole thing. A partnership of business and government. It's public liabilities and private profits. That's what your banks are into. They like that. If they overextend and they give a bunch of really stupid bad loans because of their ideology, because we have to help minorities get into homes, so they give loans to people that don't pay their bills, and you eat it because the bank's too big to fail. That'll always happen. It's an ideological driven thing. What's your ideology? Do you have one? Are you a paleoconservative? Are you a neocon? There's not really one that's good for anybody. Are you a leftist in the U.S.? There is no real left in the U.S. It's been replaced by identity politic lunatics. I see intersections between trans people and otherkins. That's the biggest problem facing America now. I mean, that's what kind of stuff they come up with. And then if you're, what passes for conservatives in America, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, corporations are what makes America great. Socialism is bad. Socialism kills people. Looks to me like capitalism's doing a knockout freaking job. What is capitalism? Do you know? Corporations that do anything they want. They're the ones that are oppressing you, not the commies. Commies are a joke these days. There aren't hardly any real commies in America. I don't think there's any real conservatives either. Excuse me, I got to attend to my eggs. That was easy. I ought to do a cooking show. Well, I was pondering over these things years ago. I'm way ahead of you, most of you. I was looking at this stuff years ago when I wrote my book. It was several years ago. I had been inspired by. I finally found something on this. Oh, there's a lot of little things like the third way. or agrarian economics, or there's agrarian, not agrarian, I can't even pronounce it. I don't remember it. I studied it a while and thought, yeah, this isn't going to work. I'll maybe put some links in some examples for your perusal. But alternatives to the three major ideologies of liberalism, communism, and fascism. Socialism's communism, fascist perspective. But what else is there? Anarchism? It's a joke. These people are got their heads so far up their ass. I know some anarchists, and they make a lot of sense, and they're great people, but they're leaving out the elephant in the room. They refuse to look at it. You know, you let people do whatever they want, you're just getting up with the same thing you got now. No holds barred, all hands off, do as thou wilt. Who said that? No, you have to have a society, you have to have an ideology. And a lot of Americans have a knee-jerk reaction to being told that. Having an ideology, well, that's bad. I'm going to be free and just do whatever I want. Well, you're going to be led around by the nose the rest of your life. You have to have principles. An ideology is a set of principles. There needs to be a fourth political theory. I saw a book that said fourth political theory. Well, I'm going to look at that. And I read it and I was fascinated and I studied it. I found other books about it. And I've never gotten away from it. I've never found anything wrong with it. The more I learn about it, the more I likes. Now, this ideology that Mr. Dugan describes, as I've mentioned earlier, is called Eurasianism. Or sometimes Neo-Eurasianism. This is a 2005 pamphlet that I don't know if I can get my hands on anywhere. Some people that I know had a whole stack of them. They just gave me one. But we're going to go through it, me and you. These books are hard to find in the West, if you can find them at all. But this is rich. This is great. And well, let's just do a little bit of it now, shall we? I should have. I don't even have a highlighter. Oh. I've got it all right here, baby. But sometimes it's kind of hard to get in the files and find the right one. I'm getting up there at my age. I don't look like it, but I'm 60, and I've had a very full life, and I got a lot going on right now. But okay, I'm going to read to you if you don't mind. Tell me what you think of that, but I'll try to be interesting. Western civilization has built its own system on the basis of secularization of Western Christianity, Catholicism, and Protestantism. It all goes to humanism, secularization. Yes, we have a Protestant and Catholic and then Protestant traditions, but you know, all that hocus pocus spiritual stuff. You know, we're all scientists now. We don't believe in that. We have to have the government separate from that. You remember the wall of separation between church and state? Do you know about the Russian eagle? The Russian eagle has two heads. Did you know that? Why? Why does it have two heads? American eagle doesn't have two heads. It's natural. No, it's not. The Russian eagle has two heads. It's a monster. No, one head is church, one head is state. And that's a sound doctrine, too. It's always been that way in ancient times, even. Your head of state usually is a parallel power to the priest class, and they work together. And ideally, in a Christian society, the priest class is supposed to represent the little people and the poor and what's good and what's right. And the head of state doesn't always go along with it, but that is at least an influence on him. A good one, I hope. The way it's supposed to work. It got corrupted. That doesn't mean to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but that's what that double-headed eagle I got the wrong. Double-headed eagle represents. That top of the eagle has two heads facing away from each other. Church and state. They're not separate. They're the same, two heads on the same beast. I don't know if it's that good a metaphor, but that's what it means. I forgot where I was. Western civilization built its own system on the basis of secularization of Western Christianity, Catholicism, and Protestantism, bringing to the fore such values as individualism, egoism, competition, technical progress, consumption, economic exploitation. The Roman German civilization founds its right to global power not on spiritual greatness, but on rough material force. Well, we can see that. Even the spirituality and strength of other peoples are evaluated only through the Western notion of supremacy of rationalism and technical progress. Well, look at those primitive people living on the plains in North America. Oh, well, they're not using the land very efficiently, just wandering around hunting buffalo. They're doing their own thing on their own land in their own time, but they had to be eradicated because other people thought there'd be a better use for that property. It's never stopped. Eurasianism is against that. Eurasianism posits a way of protecting people from that, of respecting all other cultures. It doesn't matter whether you approve of them or even if they're right. It's their culture. They should have their own place and be left alone as long as they don't harm others. Who's harming others? I think we know the answer to that question. I haven't even gotten through the first paragraph yet. This is going to take a while. This is only a pamphlet. It's rich because it's condensed. It's a primer on Eurasianism, or Neo-Eurasianism as it's often called. The original Eurasianism was put together by some philosophers in the late 18th, early 19th century, or late 19th, early 20th centuries. One of them was one that Putin cites a lot. He was heavy duty. Who was he? Ilyin. V-N. Ilyin. I-L-L-Y-I-N. He's a theologian, a scholar, and a historian. He was heavy duty. The Bolsheviks were scared to death of him. They didn't touch him. I read a lot of stuff about him. He pointed his finger at him and told them where they were wrong and what they're doing wrong, and they, respectfully bow out of the room. They never touched him. They could have probably, but they didn't. They were afraid to because of his gravitas. I don't think he had a big following back then. I'll look into that. I forgot what I read already, but I was interested in it just because Putin quotes him a lot. Putin seems to have had a big influence with that. But anyway, the original architects of this, the Eurasianists, they called them, I think, well, they called them Eurasianists, but they had another name, I think. Sorry. We'll get to that later. Okay, this is a statement. There is no universal pattern of development. The plurality of landscapes on Earth produces a plurality of cultures, each with its own cycles, internal criteria, and logic. The culture develops in its own place in a certain time, and that has its own logic as to how the culture develops. Their interaction with their creator, whether they believe in him or not, is informed by that. Nobody's got the right to interfere and destroy that. That's what Eurasianism believes. Eurasianism is deeply orthodox. It's deeply Christian. Oh, well, where did the Russians come from? Where did the Orthodox Church come from? The church, there was originally 7 churches. And that you read about in the Bible, that's important. 7 churches, and then there was this schism. The Roman Church decided that it had hegemony over everyone else. We don't have to listen to you. We don't have to have these councils that have to have unanimous decisions for doing anything major. They had to be unanimous and in unity with it. And Rome decided, well, no, we're going to do this, and we don't care if you like it or not. You just shut up and go along with it. That was the schism. The other churches are pretty much what the Orthodox Church is now. Well, Rome is the Catholic Church. And then, well, schism invites schism because the Catholic Church started spinning off all kinds of new people that saw that as an example, a few hundred years later. well, we're just gonna start our own cool rules so we can be bogus too. And then you have all the Protestant sects, and then they break up into smaller ones, and then you have more of them, and then now there's thousands. That's not how it's supposed to work. That's not good fruit. That's not indicative of someone being in God's plan or will or in the kingdom of God. I'm not saying that God's presence isn't available in those churches. I've been in little Baptist churches. I felt the presence of God. God touched me. God spoke to me. I've been in Pentecostal churches. I've been in churches where the pastor was just so pathetically ignorant it was funny, yet he could preach. It's like he'd work himself up into the spirit and then he'd preach a good sermon. And I don't have any doubt it was the truth. And I've seen all kinds of strange stuff, good and bad. You can't limit God. You can't keep him out of anywhere. There's the church, though. The church is supposed to provide an atmosphere that is conducive to the Holy Spirit. And, well, having a lesbian couple for a pastor is not conducive to that. It grieves it. It makes a mockery of it. There are certain things that are just unacceptable. There's a range of activity in which it works. Would you call it the true church? I think the true church is scattered all over the place. Well, there might be some people that are devout Christians that know God and are in God's will and doing God's work that go to a church with a couple of lesbian pastors, but they're not into it. They're going to be working against it from the inside. God help them. But anyway. I just thought that was an interesting thing to throw in that as Orthodox. Orthodox is the main channel all the way back to the original church. It's something to think about. That doesn't vindicate anything, I guess, or maybe it does. Oh, man, I'm starting to sound like Jordan Peterson. Or maybe not! But I just point that out. Every people, as long as it develops within some given geographical environment, develops its own national, ethical, judicial, linguistic, ritual, economic, and political forms. That's true. But the West doesn't recognize the economic and political and linguistic and ritual forms of, say, the Lakota Indians or the Arapaho or any of the others. Well, that's not a real economy. Well, they're pagans. Every people, as long as it develops within a geographical environment, develops its own national, ethical, judicial, ritualistic, linguistic, and economic and political forms. That's unequivocal. That's unequivocally true. If you recognize these things, the place where any people or state development happens predetermines to a great extent the path and meaning of this development, up to a point when the two elements become one. It is impossible to separate history from spectacle conditions. See, this is just the first part of this book that's dealing with the space factor, the place, geographical locations, because Eurasianism is about geographical locations. That's the place, and having your own place to do your own thing in your own time. So first we're dealing with the place. The first bit of this is about the place. Okay, it just goes on to develop this thought about the place, contrasting Japanese, Chinese, Northern Europe, the Russian steppe, the Arab, the sands of Arabia. State and nation, political platform. I'm just going to start doing random stuff out of here for a minute because it's going to take me 2 weeks to go through this at the rate I'm going. But I just wanted to give you an indication of what's in here. It's fascinating, and this is just an old primer on it. Once you get into it, you could fill a library of the literature that's been made along this line now. Eurasianism is developing, and it's a worldwide movement. And what I want to do is dispel all this hate propaganda towards it that you find it among American conservatives. Because if you Google it or if you look at what the techies say about it, it's crazy land. And I've met people say, "Oh, Dugan, I heard of him. Well, he's a Satanist." Where the hell do you get this stuff? That's what they say. He's Putin's brain. That's why he's taking over the world and trying to reestablish the Soviet Union. That's what they believe this. God bless, good American paleoconservatives, and as long as they're not neocons. But they believe things that are contrary to their own interests, and they believe things that are just going to make them crap in their own britches. It's just awful. And it's painful standing around watching it and seeing it happen. I want to try to stop it. I want to try to explain things to you that these are your allies, and this is something you could learn from. And if you would learn from it a little bit and learn to think strategically and organize, you could turn this around instead of sitting around waiting for Q and Trump to help you. I don't know about that. I really don't think they're going to do much. I think it's just another bunch of criminals. Better than the ones we got, but they're criminals, and they're just breaking off a piece of the action for themselves. They're unpredictable. I don't think they care about you. If they did, they would be telling you things that I'm telling you. But oh no, deception is necessary because we're going to put Hillary in Gitmo. Really? Yeah, we'll see. But let me find something else here. Some little juicy tidbit. I didn't prepare for this because I've been mad busy all day. I'm still trying to get some money. It ain't working. Let's stick to the subject, though. We don't talk about that. I'll talk about that later. I'm going to write something about that. These organizations and movements and your own group of people study these things for free. It doesn't cost anything. You could have a Eurasianist club. It'll be funsies. You can all chip in with your own ideas and debate it. You're going to have to learn to control things, though, if you don't already. You can't have morons in there screwing up the whole thing and vandalizing the conversation. It'd be like your garage and the elders sitting around the stove, discussing ideas. And smart-ass little boys, they can stand around along the wall. If any of them get cheeky, you throw them out. Maybe they might learn something. You run a civic club like that, a local, not a official, a 501c3 organization. I'm just talking about a loose group of people studying things. That's where it starts. I'll try to find literature for you, and you can start on your path to looking at a better way of forming an ideology to protect yourself, forming an ideology that you could come back to. Oh, that's what the Bible's for. I have the Bible. I'm a Christian. People say that and they say, well, Bible is my only ideology. I know people say that don't know very much about the Bible. The Bible doesn't have anything to do with economy and culture. It really doesn't. They built a very, very strict culture for the Levites, the priest class of the Jews. They had very strict, you have to understand what was meant. A lot of American preachers quote false prophets and amateurs and people that just bloviate that don't know what they're talking about. They translate it directly into modern English and think, well, that's what it means. Yeah, if the King James Version was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. I mean, that level of ignorance. To understand a lot of it, you have to go to somebody that is, an expert on Middle Mediterranean languages in that period of time when it was written. And I can recommend such scholars. I look at these scholars and I dabbled in it a bit myself. I didn't study Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic or anything like that, but I poured through word by word translations and went through it and spent hours trying to find out the meaning of a passage in Job. And I took a couple of days going through that. It should be pretty simple because I found two American Bible translations that said the opposite things. You can't have a translation of an ancient verse and one says one thing and one says another. So I poured through this and I saw how vague the ancient languages actually were. There's a lot of context in it. And you have to look at the big picture. You have to be, if you have time to go to college and learn all this stuff over years and years, and know what was the history and everything that's going on, then you can have a clear understanding of what is said. I'm not saying the Bible is infallible. The gospel is very simple. But if you try to build a culture out of what the Bible has, Christianity ignores culture. It's transcended. It transcends culture, economics, status, race, everything. But we live in a world where that stuff's important. It is important. You can't just ignore it. I just go by the Bible. Well, you're going to be led around by the nose by evil people if you do that. And you'll be all right. You'll go to heaven. You'll be a martyr. But that's not what you're here to do. You're supposed to build the kingdom of God. God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And right here, right now, we're just at the point of trying to stave off evil. Well, Jesus is going to come and we'll all be raptured. Oh, I hear that a lot. That's pretty dubious, really, when you go to the actual language and what's said. There's no guarantees of that. We don't even know what time period we're in. There's evidence the second coming's already happened. There's a good case for that if you want to look it up. Now, people blows their mind because that absolutely contradicts everything the pastor said. Well, your pastor's probably an idiot. Most of them are. Most of them I've seen are. Yeah, you're going to be sitting in your barca lounger watching your soft porn on Netflix, and all of a sudden you're sucked into the portals of heaven. And you're sitting there at the table of the marriage supper of the Lamb, right next to somebody that got their family tortured to death by the Bolsheviks. Or somebody across the table that got torn apart by lions in the Colosseum because he wouldn't throw a pinch of incense in Caesar's trough, right? And you're going to have to explain what a bark lounger is? I don't know. I'd feel kind of underdressed. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Back to geopolitics. I just can't stay on point, can I? I'll have to prepare better when I have time. I need to get something out here in geopolitical George, though. And here, well, it has the work of each of these different thinkers. The original movement, the advent of the movement, the context. It's consistent. And you can follow the stages of development. This isn't just something that somebody had a brain fart and decided to do. It's not all Dugan. Dugan studied these people and started promoting it. And the modern books and systems, well, it's not really a system, ideologies coming together. Anyway, what is Eurasianism today? What forms the concept of Eurasia? 7 meanings of the word Eurasianism. Evolution of the Eurasian idea. Okay. That's going to be another stumbling block for people, I suppose, because I'm talking to Americans, and most of these are from Europe or European cultures. It's not Eurasia. This is Eurasianism. It's they want everybody to do their own place at their own time. Well, Eurasianists can do that in Eurasia. No, the principles are universal. It's just coming from Eurasia for a reason. Eurasia is where it all comes together. Your Far East and your northern and southern cultures. I noticed when I was in Uzbekistan, I was transiting through Uzbekistan several times, spent a lot of time there back in the early part of this century. And I saw people, they look Chinese, but they also look European. And they look kind of Arab too. You know, the same person. Look at them from different angles and different expressions. They could be all three. It's amazing. You can see where it comes together in the architecture and everything. Eurasia is a real interesting place. And in Russia, the Russian culture, they have different forms of the word Russian. They have one word meaning the nation, the actual, like what Westerners think of. Then they have another one. It's not really an ethnicity, it's an idea. It's an idea that's universal. That a tribesman out in Siberia or a Chechnyan, or, there's all kinds of people. I can't think of the names of the tribes offhand. I was trying to think of one that's really hard to pronounce, and I better stay away from that. I'll butcher it. But it's an idea that unifies people, an idea, a set of values that are orthodox. And it doesn't matter if you're Orthodox. There's Buddhist people, there's Muslims. They all get along fine because you have this idea. They say, I am Russian, and they use the form of the word, which means the idea of being Russian. If somebody that doesn't look at all like a great Russian, which is a Slav with ancient Scandinavian mixtures in it. I mean, ethnically, the ethnicity doesn't matter. And this is all about that. This is the Russian ideal explained over 100 years ago and then rediscovered, and been a lot of thought put into this. There's people working on this. I have a book. I need to finish it. I just don't have time to read. From a guy in Uruguay that is just fascinating. And there's only two races in the world: the sons of God and the sons of the devil. The people that are subject to God's morals and those that hate them and attack them at every opportunity. I'm not talking predestination. Those people choose to do that, and they can change. That level, though, and they seldom do. St. Paul was going around persecuting Christians. I don't think he's doing it because he's evil and he hated good. He thought he was doing good. He was deceived. But there are people that persecute good because they hate it. They just hate it. Anyway, they're attracted to Nazi ideology. They want to be the avant-garde stormtroopers in the Nazi ideology because they like killing and torturing people. They enjoy it. You see examples of that in Ukraine. You don't see it in your Western media, though. Maybe someday you will. Maybe it'll all come out. And then everybody will pretend that they knew all along. Whatever. It doesn't bother me any. God knows what you did. Well, that's my first feeble attempt. Don't worry, I'll get better. But I hope you learned something from this. And I think I could actually give a coherent course, but I'd have to prepare for it and have a chalkboard and go with it and stay off rabbit trails. Most of the good teachers I knew went off on rabbit trails all the time, though. And you get something from them, and you remember them years later. Anyway, not a good place to stop, but I'm going to stop. I got a lot of stuff to do today. Uncle Billy, signing out.